Hello and welcome into Piano Talk episode 5. This is your hotline for your hardest piano questions. I'm so excited that you're here. Today we have 3 questions that are very common, and I know that at least one of them is something that you've wondered in the back of your mind as well. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to dive right into these questions. The first question is from Bonnie, and Bonnie is wondering what can help Bonnie stop hesitating going from one line of music to the next. She says, as a senior adult, the fingers don't seem to find the notes or the chords quick enough to keep the rhythm going smoothly. So, Bonnie, I love this question because, first of all, most people struggle with this. I've seen so many piano players struggle with this. And there's a few different things that could be happening. And so I want to touch a little bit on each of them so that you get the best answer as possible. So the first thing is something you actually mentioned in your question, which is the rhythm, right? You want to keep the rhythm going smoothly. And in order to keep the rhythm going smoothly, you have to have a really deep understanding of what the rhythm actually is. So my first question to you would be, are you counting out loud? And specifically, when you're going from one line to the next, are you counting those transitional spots out loud? A lot of the times when piano players get to like the end of a measure or the end of a line of music, psychologically, like we see it as the end. And so sometimes we can stop counting or we can kind of lose the momentum. And this can be like a subconscious thing that you're doing, obviously not a conscious thing, but it can happen. So make sure you're counting out loud and make sure that when you get to the end of the line, you're continuing to count even though it's the end of the line, and that way like your counting becomes your conductor. Now if you're not counting out loud, I would recommend that you learn how to count out loud. I have a rhythm playlist here on the channel. I'm gonna type a little note. I'm gonna put that rhythm playlist in the description for you, and that way you can go watch some videos about how to count out loud, how to make sure your rhythm is moving smoothly. But the second thing, and this is like the thing that a lot of piano players don't realize, is that kind of what I mentioned before, like when we get to the end of a music, oftentimes like psychologically, whether we want to or not, we see it as the end. And so our brains can stop. But furthermore, it's just visually difficult to get to the next line of music. And this is something that touches on the types of memory that are needed when you are learning how to play the piano. We have 4 types of memory at play. There's your muscle memory, which is how things feel. There's your aural memory, which is how things sound. There's your cognitive memory, which is like the culmination of all the types of memories, but also your music theory knowledge and your recognition of patterns and things like that. But there's also your visual memory. And when you are reading music and you get to the end of a line or the end of a page, visually, it's just hard to remember. I know that sounds simple and that might sound obvious, but that's part of what's happening. It's just really hard to remember, like, where am I going next? And so one of my favorite ways to practice this is to use the post-it method to practice the last measure of a line and the first measure of the next line. And so essentially what you're doing is you're using the post-its to block everything off. And you're taking, on, let's say you're on the first line of music, you're going to take the last measure of the first line and the first measure of the second line. And you're just literally going to like drill that transition over and over and over again. And you can do that with every single line of music. And what happens when you do that and when you drill that slowly and you work on your counting is you're not only helping to fix that transition, like that specific transition that you're drilling, you're also strengthening your visual memory skills in general because you're training your eyes and your brain to like remember what's happening when you have to make a visual transition from one line of music to the next. So I hope that helps. Make sure you're counting. Use the post-it method. I will also link a post-it method video if you want more details on like how to do that, and you want to actually see me like put the post-its on the screen and show you how to utilize that method. And then I will also link the rhythm course. And that one is really good for those of you that, I have a ton of free videos on it too, but for those of you who really want like the A to Z, like here's exactly how to count, here's exactly how to use the metronome, here's how to put it all together with real pieces of music, the rhythm course is great for that. Okay, Bonnie, I hope you liked that answer. Let me know in the comments. And then those of you that are watching that aren't Bonnie, let me know in the comments if you learned anything, because I know that's a really, really common issue. And we're going to go on to the next 2 questions. But if you're getting anything out of this video, give it a thumbs up, comment below, and let me know what's resonating. And then copy the link, text it, email it, share it with a group of online piano players, like in a Facebook group or a Reddit thread or something like that. If you are learning something from this video, the chances that someone else will also learn something from this video are very high, and you can be the hero by sharing the link with them. Okay. Oh, also make sure you're subscribed to the channel because I release videos every week and then I do shorts every single day. All right, second question comes from Ruby. When are you supposed to use the sustain pedal? So the sustain pedal, is the damper pedal, the one on the very right. I notice pianists use it in recordings, but I don't always see pedal markings in the sheet music, especially in works by composers like Haydn, Mozart, or Clementi. This is a great question. And this is, when it comes to pedaling Haydn, Mozart, or Clementi, really what we're talking about is this idea of artistic pedaling. And I guess pedaling is always artistic because pedaling is something ideally that you're adding in the later stages of learning a piece. It's like the decorations on the cake, right? It's not a part of the baking of the cake, it's the decorations. And so we're adding it later once we're already really solid on the things like notes and rhythm and fingering and all of that kind of stuff. And it's something that enhances the musicality. But when we look at works by Haydn, Mozart, and Clementi, the reason there are no pedal marks in those scores is because those composers were composing at a time where we didn't have a pedal on the piano, right? And so, of course, they weren't adding pedal. Well, and some of them were, but like especially Bach and things like that, if you go back to the Baroque period. So stylistically, during those times, pieces were not, like the assumption was not that everything was played legato and that everything was pedal. Once we move into the Romantic period, when we get to music after like 1825, that's when the assumption is like pedal is kind of the standard and things are more legato. But before that, it's different. We have a much wider variety of articulations. Things are a little bit more dry, and it wasn't performance practice to use the pedal because there wasn't a pedal. So you're doing this thing called artistic pedaling, which is essentially when you are having to make the choice of where do I pedal. And in pieces that come from the classical period, so before 1825, the answer is often less than you want to. You're not going to use it very much. You're not going to like throw down the pedal and hold it down for the whole piece. That would not be stylistically appropriate. You can use it in little tiny places for emphasis, for musical effect, to add a little sparkle, a little shimmer, but it's not going to be like legato pedaled, meaning we're not going to have pedal the whole time. Now, the way that you decide is there's a few ways you can do that. First of all, you can listen to the way that other artists do it. So I would recommend looking for like 3 or 4 professional recordings of the piece and listen. Ideally, if they're on YouTube, what's better is you can sometimes see their foot, and then you can like look in your music and watch what they're doing and actually like write in your score, like what does this person do? What does this person do? And you're gathering all of this information of like what are the options of how people could pedal. That's one of the ways to do it. And then another way would be to look at editions of the music that specifically come from like teaching edition. So looking at like the Alfred edition, or if there's like sometimes if there's like an edited Schirmer version or something like that, looking for those editions that have more editorial markings, because when you can find an edition that has more editorial markings, what it means is that a professional pianist at some point went through the Haydn score or went through the Mozart score and professionally edited it, meaning they put in the pedaling marks they think would be best. So you don't have to take them as set in stone, but you can use it to gather information and to see what the options are. A great resource for that would be IMSLP. That's a really wonderful website that has many editions, especially of composers that are in the public domain, like Haydn and Mozart and Clementi. And so looking at like 10 different editions and seeing if you can find any pedaling marks, that would be another great way to do it. And then beyond that, you can use your ear, you can, pedal the cadences. There's several different things you can do. So I'm gonna link to a couple of videos that will help you. One video is a video that I have about what was I just gonna say? Oh, how to listen. And how to make a listening chart, because in that video I kind of show you like how to go through and listen for things, and you could follow that for pedaling. And then the other thing that I'm going to link to is my pedal course. This is something that was released pretty recently at the time of recording this video, just a few months ago. And in this, like the whole purpose of the course is learn how to pedal, whether it's written in the score or not, right? And so I take you through, first of all, the physical aspect of like how to properly do pedal technique and how to get your foot to coordinate with the rest of what's going on, like your hands and your brain and the music. And then the second half of that course is how to make artistic choices about pedaling. And so if you want to dive deeper on this topic, that course would be perfect for you because it teaches you how to make sure your foot is doing what you want it to do, and then also how to make these choices. So that would be a great resource. I will link that in the description as well. Okay, we're gonna go on to our last question, which is from Charlie, who says, how can I play octave chords without hurting my wrist? What a great question. This is a wonderful, wonderful question. And the context here is important. The context is very important because the answer would vary slightly depending on like, are you talking about like a list etude where it's all octave chords, or are you talking about like a small section of a Mozart piece like the Rondo alla Turca? You know, like how much music are we talking about, and more specifically, what type of octave chords, because that would also change the answer slightly. But I'm going to give you the umbrella answer, and then you can take it a little bit deeper. So the first thing, whenever you are experiencing pain, when you are playing anything on the piano, and this is octave chords, this is Alberti bass, this is literally anything, you want to make sure that your piano posture is correct. And oftentimes, when I talk to advanced pianists about this, they will scoff at me and they will laugh and they will say, of course my posture is correct. I've been doing this my whole entire life. But if you are not regularly checking in with your piano posture, bad habits will slip in. And this is true for everybody. This is true for me as a professional. I have to check in with my piano posture, because I could wake up with like a crick in my neck and all of a sudden I'm doing funky things with my posture that don't make any sense and that aren't setting me up for success. And all of a sudden I'm having pain, right? Or my daughter unknowingly comes and adjusts my piano bench and puts it too low. And I don't realize that if I don't check in with my posture when I start to play. And so then I do a whole practice session at the wrong bench height. So piano posture is essential, and it is so important, and most injuries can be prevented simply by checking in with your posture. So simply, you want to be at the correct height. I'm going to show you this. You want to make sure that your forearms are parallel with the ground. If you are too low, they will make a V. If you are too high, they will be stretched out. So you want your forearms parallel to the ground. You want your biceps parallel to your torso. So you don't want to be sitting too far back, and you don't want to be sitting too far forward, right? So your biceps are parallel to your torso. You're sitting up nice and tall, but your shoulders are also relaxed and not coming up to your ears. You want both heels firmly planted on the ground, and you want to make sure that to the best of your ability, your fingers are rounded and you are playing on the edge of the keys. Now, as you do octaves, this will change a little bit, and as you move in and out of different musical patterns, you're not always going to be like this. Sometimes the fingers will be a little bit more flat, sometimes they will stretch out a little bit more, but you're always coming back to this neutral hand position. So then that sets you up for success. And when you're doing octaves, you want to make sure that, you want to make sure, my lighting is getting all messed up, but that's okay. You want to make sure that you're not tensing up right here in the wrist. So oftentimes when people need to do octaves, they start to kind of like create a lot of tension. It's like they contract their muscles, and that even like all the way up through your shoulder and your neck, it can start to get really tight. So you want to make sure that your shoulder joint is really loose. You want to make sure that your elbow is really loose, and you want to make sure that your wrist is really loose. And we can make the shape of an octave, and you can kind of get used to this like flapping motion. I don't have a better word for it, but this motion where like you're kind of waving, right? And that's essentially what we want. And you'll notice when I'm waving, it's not possible for my wrist to be tense like this, right? And it's not possible for my elbow or my shoulder to be tense like that either. And that's the motion that I want when I'm doing octave chords. Now, that gets a little harder depending on the size of your hand, if you have like notes in between those octaves, but essentially you still want that flapping motion. Now, if the chords are so big and you're stretching so much that that's not possible, that's when we would start getting into like, okay, some very gentle stretches for the hand, which I don't show on videos because I don't want anybody to get injured and I don't want to be responsible for that. That's something I would show you if you were like in the live classes inside Casual to Confident. But more than that, if you're a hobby player, I would consider like just omitting a note of the chord, right? And so that would be the next best option, would be to just start leaving out a note or two of the chord so that you could play them without hurting your wrist. Never practice through pain, ever, regardless of what you're practicing. Pain is always a signal to stop and investigate, not to push through. So that's my advice. Now, Charlie, I have 10 technique breakthroughs, which is a little bundle of like 10 class replays of me showing pianists, like real pianists, how to do proper technique with various different musical patterns. That would be a really, really, really great resource. It's only $10, so I'll link that in the description below. And then I also have a piano posture checklist that has 3 pages that you can print out or keep on your iPad or whatever and keep them next to your piano, that you can go through every single time you're going to practice to ensure that you have that proper posture. I just went through a lot of it right here in the video, but it's more detailed and it talks about other things as well, and you'll get in the habit of doing that every time you play, and it really builds a solid foundation of proper posture and proper technique. You cannot have proper technique unless you have proper posture. And you cannot play without pain unless you have proper technique and proper posture. So I will throw those in the description below. Actually, if you're going to grab 10 for 10, there's an option to add the posture checklist for a lower price. I would just do it that way, because that way you'll get both and it'll be a lot cheaper. All right, everybody. I hope you got something out of this video. Give it a thumbs up, comment below. I will see you next time. Make sure, the link to submit questions is also going to be in the description. So make sure to click on that, submit your questions. No question is too big or too small. There's also an option to leave an audio file, which if you do, no one has done it yet, but I really want someone to do it. You could leave an audio file, then I'll actually play your question live, which would be fun, like a real piano talk show. So, all right, happy practicing, everybody. I'll see you soon.